what you can tell us on that, and also whether you're able to give us information, or anyone within the legal team is able to give us any information as to if WorkSafe New Zealand was to become involved in an investigation as per the April 4 Health and Safety at Work legislation, where would they ultimately head? Where would the liability sit? Would it sit with the owner of the bridge, NZTA? Would it sit with the enabler council, or would it sit with the operator, PIP?
I'll just answer the first part of that question, and then I'll ask Bram to come forward and answer the second part. So the first part is for resource consent process. The trust talked to a number of parties, including the New Zealand Fire Service, and got their okay for the concept designs. So you've got to remember that if we looked at those images, they're open air, so the fire concerns are very low, because if there is a fire, the fumes, is that the right word, would escape, and people can leave via the two exits. So Skypath's only just over a K long, so that's important to think of. And then as part of detailed design, there'll be further work around those matters, and they'll need to be rechecked with New Zealand Fire Service, etc. as well.
Thank you.
Bram, do you want to come forward?
Yes, just to answer quickly the health and safety issue. Look, obviously the health and safety at an operational level is absolutely paramount. The project won't be going anywhere unless all those requirements, these are the operating requirements of the project, are completely to everyone's satisfaction. In terms of the legal liability issues, the council is a party to the transaction, and we're involved in specifying outcomes and to some extent service levels and so on if we proceed with this. So reluctant to just give an off-the-cuff answer about the exact nature of what our duty might be, but we would be working on the basis that irrespective of drawing for any fine legal lines, we're wanting to ensure complete best practice and take whatever as many reasonably practical steps we can do to ensure that's the case.
But it's certainly the expectation that part of that duty would lie with Auckland Council.
Sorry?
It's certainly your expectation that part of that liability, given that we are a key party to this project, would lie with Auckland Council.
Potentially, the legislation from April is not quite framed in, well, it's framed in a certain way, which is more towards orthodox procurement, principal contractor relationships and so on, which is what we've got here is in a way a little bit more like backstop funding with outcomes conditions. So it's not dissimilar to many other arrangements we have. So I think the only answer I'll give now on the record is that I think we just take the safe and prudent, cautious approach and work to the high standard that we would set ourselves in these things.
But at this point, I can deduce from what you're saying is that the liability around health and safety is still not absolutely clear and still has to be worked through.
Well, you're talking as a matter of interpretation under the Health and Safety Act. There's lots of interpretational issues to work through there. But look, for present purposes, potentially, yes, we do have some exposure, so we'll look at those issues extremely carefully. The primary responsibility and exposure, of course, is with the actual operator.
Thank you.
You want to? Yep, they're fine. Member Tapiri.
Nā koe you, Mr. Chairman, nā mihi nui kia kōrua. Just noting that mana whenua engagement was initiated in around 2013, what's the latest engagement that you've had?
Through the Chair, so the Trust has had a number of hui with iwi. I would say that from memory there was one at the beginning of this year. If not, it would be at the end of last year. So they've been updates on progress, design changes, those kind of meetings.
Okay, and the four that are listed in the Māori impact statement, is there any more added to that list now, or?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
Right, do we have a mover and a seconder, please? The Mayor will move and seconded by councillor Penrose, I saw, was it? No? No, it was councillor Walker, thank you. All those in favour?
Aye.
Thank you, John, thank you, Marguerite. We will now go to item 12. Please stay where you are.
I'll just invite Robert and Bram to join us as well.
Right, thank you, Chair. So this second item on the agenda regarding Skypath is the report around the consideration of the public-private partnership proposal. Again, I don't intend to go through this line by line. We've had 2 workshops on this already. We've had a number of discussions and so forth, but it's possibly worth just having a very quick recap as to where we are, and then outline really the path forward and speak briefly to the resolutions that sit at the end of it. So just to remind everyone, of course, that this actually is what we're looking at here is actually a procurement proposal rather than the project itself. PPPs are actually a procurement tool. They're not actually a project or anything along those lines. So this is what we're considering in this paper. And if we go back, the governing body back in 19 December 2013 asked us to go away as the executive and explore this option for procuring this project, and we went to the market, we sought expressions of interest, we got responses. The one we've run through with has been the PIP Fund's proposal, as we're all aware. We entered into a heads of agreement, which is the normal way these processes work. You have to start the dance somewhere, so we've entered into a heads of agreement with them to work out what this thing might look like and a sort of high-level viability test, and money's been spent by them on that initial work, and that really leads us to where we're trying to get to today, I think, which is about how to take this project further forward and into further detail, which might help answer some of the questions that the likes of Councillor Brewer have asked as you start to then properly drill into those issues around health and safety and so forth. But we need that commitment from both parties to push forward in order to work through that. Other things I'd just draw your attention to is the items there in terms of, as I look down that executive summary, point 5 there about the kind of proposal there. We've, as I say, we've workshopped all this stuff, but it's designed to finance, build, maintain and operate Skypath on a user pays basis for a 25-year term before it reverts back to us. The other things I'd just like to highlight to you in that executive summary is point 7, which the report outlines how we've actually evaluated this, and I think a number of speakers have already noted the detail of work that's gone into this, the independent reviews from Price Waterhouse, to how we've looked at the high-level detail around this project, and clearly the proposal's got some key merits to it, hasn't it? That it'll actually be delivered sooner than we would possibly do it if we were doing it ourselves, that the council won't carry the entire financing cost. The private sector clearly in a proposal like this are incentivised to manage and finance and operate, maintain the project in an innovative way, and essentially provide an efficient whole-of-life use for this. So I probably don't want to spend too much more time on anything, but just to before we go to questions and so forth, but just to kind of highlight a couple of things that seem to be a key part of the discussion here. We keep coming back to talking about the patronage numbers. Let's be quite clear about that. The patronage risk, if we did this project as the council ourselves and we funded it with the significant capital outlay and operating costs, we would still be facing those patronage risks, whether we were doing it ourselves or someone else was doing it. The interesting thing when we went and tested the market on this was the one risk that the market, the private sector, was not willing to take on. And so we have to understand as we go through this process that this is the key part of the risk that we're looking to have to take on. And we would have assumed that risk if we were prepared to do the project on our own balance sheet. So it's not a one or other, and so it's important to understand the counterfactual there. The other piece I just want to make sure everyone's quite clear on is the underwrite is actually an underwrite of a revenue. The underwrite is not an underwrite of a return on capital invested for the private sector. It is merely to mitigate or reduce that patronage risk that we've all identified as inherent in the project. And that's not dissimilar to any of the other PPPs in the sort of transport sector that are going on all around the country at the moment as well. And then the last point I just want to sort of draw people's attention to, and it really goes to the recommendations. What we're looking for here is approval for the Chief Executive under his delegation to continue the discussion and work towards a final project that within a sort of financial envelope in terms of the risk we're prepared to take on this. We need to move this forward. We've had a lot of conversations about what does this look like, what does the structure look like, what does the NZT, where's NZTA sit on this. The reason we need to go to this next step is we've gone only so far, and at some point the party we're engaging with really needs to be clear that we're serious about actually executing a transaction if it makes sense for all parties concerned before they continue to spend further money on the detailed design work and so forth. And so we've kind of got to this interesting moment of truth where we really got to decide whether we're actually going to go forward with this project or to run it to its logical conclusion and determine whether it actually has merit and whether it actually does stack up financially. And we can't answer that question, and I think Councillor Brewer, you were saying, well, we don't have the final capital cost and so forth. No, that's right, we don't. We have a rough ballpark, and you've seen that in the workshops, but until we're prepared to commit to taking to the next step, which is what we're asking for here, we won't be able to flush those out. Bear in mind, of course, that capital cost is not ours, it's actually the private sector's. But it will ultimately back solve to where that underwrite risk lies. And so what we're looking for is to take it forward to that next step in good faith with both parties. We may not come to a deal. Let's be absolutely clear here. We may actually get to a point where both parties agree this just doesn't stack up financially for either side, in which case nothing will proceed. So that's the important point. And this is typically how these types of processes work. High level heads of agreement, and then at some point the parties have to commit that within the framework that they've kind of considered that they are prepared to do a deal, and that's really where we're at. So I'll leave it there. I'm not sure if others want to add to, but probably just, we've workshopped it enough, I think, so probably to questions.
The Mayor wanted to actually just speak, and I don't think there's any questions yet.
Well, I'll wait for the questions and then lead the debate.
Well, the question's about to start, so...
Oh, I was going to wait till after the questions.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
rightio. Right, well, we have Councillor Darby first.
Thanks, Mr Chair. Look, I'll pose a question, but I'd like to put on the table and invite the Mayor to second or move, Mr Mayor. Would you like to move, Mr Mayor?
I'm happy to move it.
And I'll second then, Mr Chair. And my question, there's been a lot of contention, a bit of contention here today about the exposure of the council. And there's been suggestion that we don't know the cost of the capital, we don't know the cost of OPEX. And John Marguerite, and others, you've made it clear in the reports, but can we hear it again? And for my own benefit as well, is there risk on the council wearing any capital escalation? Is there risk for council if there is any OPEX escalation?
The answer to that's quite clear. At the point at which we've struck the final agreement, we are set. So if there's further cost escalations from there to the account of the private sector provider, and the same if their operating costs don't meet the numbers that went into the model that we agreed to for their cost. And again, I'll remind everyone, we are underwriting a revenue line only.
So we are not underwriting the capital build of this project?
No, not past the point where we've actually struck an agreement. So there'll be and the agreement we framed around landing on a number, obviously. Should it accelerate from that or exceed that, which is exactly what's happening down in Wellington right at the moment with a large project, it's for the cost of the other party.
Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Penrose.
No, I'm waiting for the debate, Mr Chair, so unless you're...
Now, Councillor Casey, have you
Yeah, I asked a question earlier and you said to wait. So the question was about the 25-year clause that where we get it back. We've heard from a lot of submitters, and my personal view is it should be free. It's not free. This is the best compromise we've got, but I'm really anxious to get it back in public ownership. But it seems that whole section's all blacked out. So I've got the unblacked out version, but I'm not sure. My question is, what happens if it's so successful within 5 years a new council, a new government wants to bring it back into public ownership? What can you see?
Yeah, well, we have the option of taking it back at any time after after an initial period of 3 or 4 years is what we've discussed. But of course, we'd effectively at that point just be buying someone out of their contract. So that would just be a market value acquisition of the operation, and then we can do with it what we like. By extension also, if we wanted to apply subsidies or discounts, Morrison & Co. are more than happy for us to do so on a no better, no worse off basis. So the point is, I suppose they're signing up to a concession arrangement, 25-year deal. Once we have a lock on the base case, they're on contract and they're on risk. So it goes both ways.